Hello everybody, in this video we are going to continue our conversation about graphing parabolas and identifying their key features. So I just want to give you a quick reminder of what we did in the previous videos. So in the previous videos we talked about the vocabulary words that we are identifying on our graphs. I also use a TI Nspire calculator to be able to create a table of values and then from there graph my functions. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of these examples together. So I'm going to start with this one right here. The first thing I'm going to point out is that it is in standard form. Our -2 is our A value, our -6 is our B value, and our constant, which would be C, is -30. So with that being said, let me grab my calculator. Let's go ahead and use this. So if you're also using a TI Nspire, let me walk you through this process. Now, once you create one graph, you don't have to recreate the first set of steps. So once you create it, we can go here. Now, I usually like, there it goes. I click on the graph side first because notice how I had my cursor in the table. And so I like to go and physically click on the graph and then hit tab. If you hit tab, F2 comes up, but F2 would just add a second equation to this graph. And that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to scroll up until I find F1, which is the one that I actually typed in. And so I'm just going to use this to replace. So I'm going to delete what I have here originally. And I'm going to type in the new equation that I'm going to look at. So for this one right here, we're going to use a -2x squared, like that, a -16x, and then a -30. Okay. Once you type it in, you're going to have to hit enter or it doesn't register and it won't update this table. So if I hit enter, notice there's a couple things that I can see on my graph. I can see that because my A value was negative, my graph is not going to open up, it's going to open down. And so these are the numbers that I'm going to use. So I'm going to look at my graph and remember that I'm going to start with -7. So I'm going to go to my graph and I'm going to scroll up until I start with -7. Now notice that I can't go down to -16. -7's here, but I can't go down that far, so I'm going to skip that one and go to the next one. I can do -6, -6, which is right here, and then I can do -50. -4 goes up to 2, so you got to be careful because we're doing negatives and positives. And then notice that when I get to -3, it gives me 0 again. And if I go to -2, it gives me -6. So I'm going to move this over. -2, -6. So most of the time, like I said, this is going to be a symmetric graph, but I notice that this is the point in the middle. It's also the highest point on the graph, so that is going to be considered my vertex. I'm going to connect my dots like this. And then since I was able to identify my vertex, I'm going to draw a vertical line through my vertex. And I'm going to draw a horizontal line through my vertex, like this. Okay. And then I'm going to write that my vertex is the point -4, +2. So I'm put a little X and a little Y here just to remind you which one is which and what order they should be written in. And then from here, I know that this vertical line is my axis of symmetry. We know that a vertical line is going to be X equals wherever it crosses the X-axis, which is -4. Now, I do want to remind you that when we're identifying the minimum or the maximum, it's not minimum and maximum, it's one or the other. You can't have both, okay? So because this one has arrows and they keep on going down indefinitely, and then it keeps on going, this one keeps on going to the right, and this one keeps on going to the left. So for this one, our highest point is our vertex. So it's not going to be a min, it's going to be a maximum. So a maximum value has a horizontal line through it, so that is going to be y equals 2. The highest point goes up to 2 on the y-axis. And then from here, we already know that our domain is all real numbers because it continues to go to the left and it continues to go to the right. So all real numbers. And then the last thing we're going to look at is our range. So our range has to do with our y values of this graph. So I'm going to start off with y. We know that the highest point is a 2. But notice that your graph doesn't go beyond the 2. That's why we drew the line here. So this entire graph is below that line. So all the y values below this line are less than 2. So we're going to say it's going to be less than, equal to, positive 2. Okay? Because notice that this point is sitting on the 2. And then everything else is below. That's why we're using the equal to, because it's actually on the line and then everything else is below the line. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our x-intercepts. I know we don't identify them all the time. And so notice that here's my x-axis, and I can see that these 2 points, it does go through 2 different times. So our graph touches the x-axis 2 different times, so it has 2 different routes, 2 different x-intercepts, 2 solutions. Sometimes they even call them zeros. So this graph actually has 2 zeros at -5 and -3. But I'm actually not going to write that one down because we're actually going to use that later on. Okay. All right, and that is it. So I'm going to go through here and color code just because that's what I do, just because I want to make sure that my numbers match up. So remember, your axis of symmetry is the one that matches your x value. And then our y value matches up with the minimum and maximum, which in this case is a max, but it also matches up with your range. So notice that we're recycling and using the same numbers. All right, I'm going to quickly look at the second example with y'all. All right, I actually changed my mind because I realized that question number 3 here actually has a fraction in it, and I know sometimes when we see a fraction, we think we have to do something completely different, and that's not necessarily the case. So I do want to identify this as my a value. Notice it's a fraction, but it's a positive fraction. So that tells me that my graph is going to open up. I have this -2 as my b value, and then my 1 is a constant, so that's going to be the c value. All right, I'm going to go back to my calculator here. I'm going to see how this one's highlighted. That lets me know that I need to click on the graph. Okay, once you click on the graph, you can hit tab. And I'm going to go back up to F1, and then I'm going to move my cursor all the way to the end. Oh, not menu, sorry. All right, and then hit, oh, I have to do that all over again. Where's my cursor? Oh, there it is. Okay, so then I'm just going to delete all of this. All right, and then because this is a fraction, you can use your fraction feature. I'm being a little lazy, so I'm going to use a parentheses 1 divided by 2, close it, and then do x squared. Okay, and then from there, we have this minus 2x, and then we're going to do a plus 1. Okay, so it's very important that if you're going to use your calculator to do this, that you type everything correctly. All right, I'm going to hit enter so it can update both sides. And so once again, you can see that my graph is opening is opening up because my a value is positive. And so now I have these numbers here. Now I'm going to also be honest with you. I personally don't like to graph the decimals. So I'm going to skip around and just find the whole numbers. So because this graph starts at 0, notice how it starts at 0, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to also start at 0. So notice that 0 has a 1, so we're going to say 0, 1. And then there's a decimal, I'm going to skip it. We're going to go to 2 and -1. And then skip it. 4 and +1. And then if I go here, it tells me to go up to 7 and I don't have enough space. Now, these decimals are actually very easy to graph decimals. So if you want to, you can actually graph the 5 and then go up to, oh well, that one doesn't fit either. Okay. Or if you want to do this the negative half. So if you go to 3, you can go down to negative half. And I believe there was another negative half. So 1 and negative half. So if you need those extra points in there just to kind of guide your graph, that's perfectly fine. But if you don't, then you can just use the ones that are given to you. All right, so I'm going to move this over. I can already see that my vertex is my middle point. It's also the lowest point on the graph. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these dots the best that I can. Okay. I'm also going to draw my vertical line through my vertex. And a horizontal line through my vertex. Okay. And so I can see that that point is my vertex. So we want to start with this one. And we're going to say positive 2, negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and keep on labeling it. And so from here, we can say our axis of symmetry is the vertical line. So it's going to be x equals 2. Then because the vertex is the lowest point, we're going to call that a minimum, not a maximum. And that is a horizontal line. So y is equal to negative 1. We know our domain is all real numbers. And then the last thing is our range. So look at your horizontal line. Notice that the entire graph is sitting on top of that horizontal line. So we're going to say y is greater than equal to a negative 1. Okay? Because we have a point at negative 1 and then the rest of the points are above or greater than negative 1. Okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and color code these as well just so you can see that they match. So there's my axis of symmetry. And then I have my y value that matches up with my minimum. And it also matches up with my range. Okay. Alright, I'm actually going to stop right here. I know we skipped over the second graph, but I definitely want you to use the same skills that we used for the first and the third to be able to finish off the second one on your own. Okay. I hope that these examples have helped, and I'll see you guys in the next videos.